the Kabbalistic tradition. Now, Kabbalah is the Theosophy of Israel. The word Kabbalah comes from a Hebrew root which means to receive. Hence, Kabbalah means reception, or that which is received, or more generally, tradition. Are any of you familiar with a musical called Fiddler on the Roof?
Yes.
Well, if so, you will remember the Milkman's wonderful song about tradition. All right, well, that's something which is very important in Judaism. Now, Madame Blavatsky knew quite a lot about Kabbalah. In fact, she knew quite a lot about an amazing number of different things. Colonel Alcott, in Old Diary Leaves, records that one of our visitors, this is when they were living in New York, before they came to England and then to India. One of our visitors was a mystical Hebrew physician. For 30 years he had studied the Kabbalah, and his conversations with HPB were largely confined to this subject. He said one evening in my hearing that despite his 30 years of research, he had not discovered the true meanings that she read into certain texts and that illumined them with a holy light. So she was very insightful about Kabbalah. Let's see if this is going to work. Yes. Kabbalah is, as I said, the Theosophy of Israel, and as such, it has a central glyph or symbol, which is called the Etz Chaim, which means the tree of life. And that tree of life consists of 10 circles, 10 numbers. They are called, each one is called a sephirah, which means simply a number. And the plural of sephirah in Hebrew is sephirot. So we have 10 sephirot with various names. Each one has its own name in Hebrew and with the English translations you see on the board. I am showing this glyph because we will keep coming back to it. It is the central glyph of Kabbalah. Now, I'm going to approach the subject of Kabbalah in a historical vein, because Kabbalah developed gradually over the centuries. And we know the history of Kabbalah quite well. So I'm going to outline the history very briefly first, and then we will go back and take it stage by stage and talk about aspects of Kabbalah which developed at different historical periods. The earliest period was something called Merkabah mysticism. Merkabah means the chariot, and this refers to the book of the prophet Ezekiel. We'll come back to that. And then we have something, and that is not really Kabbalah, that is pre-Kabbalah entirely. And then we have Proto-Kabbalah developing with a book called the Sefer Yetzirah, which means the book of formation. And then by the 12th century, we get more clearly Central Kabbalah developing in Spain with the Sefer HaBahir, the Book of Clear Light, and especially the main work of all Kabbalah, which was the Sefer HaZohar, or the Book of Divine Splendor. Now, something happened in 1492, which was extraordinarily important. What was the great event which modified Western culture that happened in 1492? Oh, you gave the answer I wanted, which is not the answer I want. What everybody thinks of, at least in America, when you say what happened in 1492, is Columbus discovering America. Actually, some other people knew about it before him, but that's the great. But no, something else happened in 1492, which was extraordinarily important for all of Western culture. In 1492, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Castile conquered the Moors and unified all of Spain under a single Spanish government and drove out the Moors, who had occupied Spain for a long while. And when they did so, that had profound consequences for the Jewish population of Spain. The Moors were actually quite open-minded, quite tolerant. They were not at all like some of the modern fundamentalist Islamicists. Islam has had a very varied history, and very often in the past it was quite open and quite tolerant. And they were very tolerant of the Jews in Spain. When Isabel and Ferdinand took over, they gave all of the Jews a choice. They could be converted to Christianity or else. Well, many of them converted to Christianity. Many of them decided they would take the or else, which was, to save their lives, to be exiled from Spain. And so there was a vast migration of Jews, especially learned Jews, especially the Jewish scholars, out of Spain to other places. They went to Italy, they went to Greece, they went to Palestine. Right? Now, as it happened, those were especially the Kabbalistic scholars. Now, Kabbalah had been largely confined to Spain. It got spread to other parts of the world as a result of 1492. This is one of the interesting things. In history, very often, things which seem like disasters to the people to whom they happen turn out in the long run to have great benefits to general humanity. Another example of this is, of course, what happened in Tibet, rather more recently, when the Chinese moved in and took over Tibet. And the Dalai Lama and many of the lamas left Tibet. What was the consequence of that? Tibetan learning became more widely known in the world, whereas before it had all been locked up tight in Tibet. Same thing happened in 1492. As a result of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain, Kabbalah became more widely known, whereas before it had been largely combined. And Kabbalah became a very important element in the European Renaissance. Very important element in the Renaissance. The Renaissance not only revived classical learning from the Middle Ages, but it incorporated much mystical knowledge from the Near East, including Kabbalah, which had developed in Spain. So we get Christian Kabbalah by the 15th century. And then we also get from the migrations to Palestine, we get a special kind of Kabbalah which developed in Palestine in the city of Safed, whose chief figure was Isaac Luria. We're going to come back and talk about all of these things in more detail, right, as we go along. This is just an overview. And then, of course, by the 18th century, one gets in Russia or the Slavic area generally, the development of Hasidism, which is still a major part of Kabbalah today. And in the 19th century, there was an occult interest in Kabbalah, which developed in France, which was the center of the occult revival in the 19th century. And then finally, we have modern Kabbalah. Now, the interesting thing about Kabbalah is that of the three systems, the three esoteric systems, codes we have looked at so far, Kabbalah is the one which has had not only a continuous history, but still a very vibrant and vital presence in the world. There are still some alchemists practicing, but there are not many of them. The chances of having an alchemist live next door to you is very small. The chance of having a Kabbalist live next door to you is much greater, right? All right, so Kabbalah is still a vibrant part of it. All right, let's go back then and reprise this history, and we will go back to the Merkabah mysticism. As I said, Merkabah mysticism is derived from the book of the prophet Ezekiel. In the first chapter of that book, Ezekiel describes a vision he had. And in his vision, he saw a chariot. And the chariot was pulled, the chariot had wheels, with wheels within wheels, and all of the wheels had eyes around them. and it was pulled by 4 beasts. One had the head of an ox, one the head of a lion, one the head of a bull, one the head of a man. And here is Ezekiel down here, witnessing his vision up here. On the top of the chariot was a throne, and on the throne sat God. And the chariot was able to take Ezekiel up into the higher heavens, where he had experiences of those worlds. Now, what Merkabah mysticism did was to introduce the concept of levels of worlds, or what in Theosophy are called planes. Right? So that notion of planes is characteristic of Kabbalah, which inherited it from Merkabah mysticism. And interestingly enough, there are in Kabbalah, guess how many planes? 7, of course. And not only are there 7, but they are divided into 3 higher ones and 4 lower ones. Does that sound familiar to those of you who know Theosophical cosmology? All right. The 3 higher ones are called the veils of negative existence. And the first of those is called, in Hebrew, ayin. Now that's the Hebrew spelling, and ayin is the way it's pronounced. And ayin means nothing. Not. No. And it corresponds to what in Buddhism, Northern Buddhism, is called the void. Right? Or what in Gnosticism is called the silence, which we talked about. Right? It's the same thing exactly. All right, the second of the negative veils is Ein Sof. Now actually, that's the word Ein, and that's the word Sof. Sof does not mean wisdom, don't get it confused with Greek. Right? Sof means limit or boundary. So Ein Sof means no limit, no boundary, and hence it means the infinite. Incidentally, that's the same word, as you can tell. Hebrew has a construction which is called the construct. When you put 2 words together, the pronunciation of the first one changes. Some of you may be familiar with this. The Hebrew word for house is bayit, but many Hebrew temples or congregations are called something like Beit David, which means the house of David. Bayit, when it's combined with the word David, changes the pronunciation from bayit to Beit. Right? It's a normal form of Hebrew grammar. And so ayin changes its pronunciation to ein when it comes before the word sof, which means boundary. So this is Ein Sof, the no boundary, hence literally the infinite. And that corresponds to the plenum, the fullness, or in terms of Gnosticism, the pleroma, which also means the fullness. Remember, the pleroma comes out of the sea, out of the silence. So too, the Ein Sof comes out of the ayin. And then the third veil of negative existence is the Ein Sof Or. Ein Sof still means infinite or boundless, and Or means light in Hebrew. So the boundless or infinite light. And that corresponds to what in Theosophy we call the light of the Logos. Okay? All right, those are the 3 higher worlds. Now let's get into the 4 worlds. We don't know about the 3 higher worlds. We don't, by personal experience, only if you have gnosis. You learn about them. But ordinary experience of ours does have some contact with the 4 lower worlds. And the highest of those is called Atzilut, which is the world of emanation. Atzilut simply means emanation. And it corresponds in theosophical term to the Buddhic plane. And that is a level of reality which we can perceive, but which we cannot put into words. Right? We can experience it, but we can't very well talk about it, because words are not adequate to it. The next level before that is called Beria, which means creation, and that corresponds essentially to the higher monastic or the causal plane of experience. It's a level on which we can see, we can have new insights. In Hebrew, it is said to be the level of yesh ma'ayin. You know what ayin means? Right? From up there. And m is the Hebrew preposition for from, and yesh means something. So yesh ma'ayim means something from nothing. Right? We can have new insights. We can have fresh views of things. This is what Krishnamurti talked about, right? Seeing the world newly, freshly. The next world below that is the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, and it's the lower monastic plane combined with the comic plane. These go together, typically. And this is the level of sensory-based thought and mental conditioning. And it's the world, Kabbalah says, in which we have yesh ma'yesh, something from something, which we experience and then get some ideas from. And the lowest world of all is the world of Asiya, which is the world of action, and that's the physical world in which we live. Okay, so that's the general Kabbalistic view of the world. Now, in those worlds, we have 5 souls, according to Kabbalah, and we might say that these correspond with the principles in Theosophy. We'll do them in reverse order. The lowest one is Nefesh, and Nefesh would correspond roughly in Theosophy to the Linga Sharira and Prana. It's the level of vital consciousness which underlies the physical, right? And then above that, we have the Ruach, which is the outward turning mind. And so this corresponds more or less to Kama and Kama Manas. Right? And then above that, we have the Neshama, which is the higher self, and that pretty well corresponds with the Buddhi Manas, okay, the higher mind, which reincarnates. And still above that, we have the Chaya, and Chaya literally simply means living, and it is the Buddhi. And finally, at the highest level, we have the Yechidah, and the Yechidah is the unity, and hence corresponds with the monad, the atmic spark in us. Don't you think this is remarkably consonant with theosophical thought? Of course, I've deliberately interpreted these 5 souls, which are talked about in Kabbalah, in theosophical terms, but they match. They match very nicely. All right, let's move along then. After Merkabah mysticism, we have the development of Proto-Kabbalah with this wonderful book called the Sefer Yetzirah, a very little book, but it is a book about the Hebrew alphabet. And those are the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet on the screen now. That's a remarkable thing. The Hebrew alphabet is a variety of the ancient Semitic alphabet which was used in Israel, in Palestine. And it is, that Semitic alphabet is the origin of the Greek alphabet and the origin of the Latin alphabet. Writing was introduced, developed, invented many times in the history of humanity in various parts of the world, but the alphabet was invented only once by a group of Semites. And every alphabet now used on the face of the earth is a historical derivative of that earliest alphabet. It was a remarkable invention. The alphabet is a system of writing in which one letter stands for one sound. Right? No other writing system is like that. So the Hebrew alphabet is the best known example. Of course, Arabic alphabet also is derived from that early Semitic one. Now, here are the names of the Hebrew letters, and for those of you who are familiar with the names of the Greek alphabet, you will see immediately the similarity. But the thing is, the Greek alphabet names don't mean anything. Alpha, beta, gamma don't mean anything. They're just the names of the letters, right? They have no independent meaning. the name of the first letter in the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph, which is the source, obviously, of Alpha. Greek can't end a word in F, the sound F. So they had to end a vowel on the end. So Aleph turned into Alpha. But Aleph means ox. And originally, that, it may not look like an ox in that conventional form, but that was originally a picture of an ox. Yeah. I could show you that if we had more time. Bet is the Hebrew word we've already said for house. Right? And that becomes in Greek, beta. You have to add the vowel on the end. Greek words can't end in a T. And that was originally the picture of a house. Gimel then becomes gamma, can't end in an L. So instead of saying Gimelat, they became simply gamma. And again, Gimel in Hebrew means a camel. And in fact, the English word camel is derived ultimately from the Semitic word gimel. They even sound a little alike, don't they? All right. And Dalet means a door. And that was originally a picture of a door. Becomes delta, and so on. Now, not only is this alphabet the origin of all alphabets used in the world today, but each letter corresponds to a number. And those are very important in Kabbalah, because one technique of Kabbalah was to take a word and convert it into a number, according to those correspondences. And if you got two words that had the same number, they were equivalent somehow, mystically. So much Kabbalistic interpretation of Scripture involves this kind of what is called notocharion, or conversion into numbers, and interpretation based on numbers. And as long as we're talking about that, let's look at this. The name of God in Hebrew was spelled YHVH. And those are the Hebrew letters for it. YHVH, I mentioned to you the other day, right, was interpreted by early translators of Hebrew Scripture as Jehovah. Wrong. That's a misunderstanding. I won't go into how it came about, it would take too long, but it's a misunderstanding. We don't know how it was pronounced. We guess, but we don't know. The sacred name was not pronounced normally aloud. And even today, pious Jews will not write it. They will never write. They won't even write the English version, God. They will put just a G instead. Now, that Hebrew name, YHVH, which is the name of God, got a special interpretation in Kabbalah. Kabbalah said that it is actually the name of Adam Kadmon. Kadmon means primeval, very ancient. So Adam Kadmon is primeval humanity, is what we would call the monad, which is the origin of all of us. Right? We are all reflections of the monad. So Adam Kadmon corresponds theosophically to the monad. And the monad is YHVH. And they did this, they wrote these letters in a way which represented a human figure. So the first, this is Y, that's the Hebrew way of writing Y, and there it is, right? And that represents the head of Adam Kadmon. And the second letter is the H, and it's written like that in Hebrew, and there it is. It represents the shoulders and arms of Adam Kadmon. And the next letter is V, which is written like that in Hebrew, and that represents the trunk of Adam Kadmon. And then there is a final H written there, and that represents the hips and legs of Adam Kadmon. So Kabbalah wrote the letters of the divine name in a form which represented a human figure, because Adam Kadmon was the primeval human being, or monad. Now, we also get the development of the Sephirot. They come forth from, remember the three veils of negative existence we had? The third of them was the Ein Sophor, the boundless light, or the light of the Logos. from it comes forth 10 emanations, or numbers. And those are the Sephirot. And the form of their coming forth is exactly like that, and that is called the lightning flash. They come forth like a flash of lightning. Now here are the 10, and I'm going to give you their names now. The top one is called Keter, which means the crown. The next one is called Chokhmah, which means wisdom. The next is called Bina, which means understanding. Then Chesed, which means mercy. Geburah, which means strength or severity. Tiferet, which means beauty. Netzach, which means victory or power. Hod, which means glory. Yesod, which means foundation. And finally, Malchut, which means kingdom. Now there's something interesting about this. Do you all remember, or do you all know the ending formula for the Lord's Prayer, not used in the Roman Catholic Church, but used in many Protestant churches, in fact most Protestant churches? What is the final ending? It's used in the Church of England, for example. What's, for thine is the
kingdom, the power, and
the kingdom, the power, and the glory. Where do you suppose that came from? It's a Kabbalistic formula, right? Incorporated into the Lord's Prayer. There is also an 11th Sephirah, a mysterious one, which is not normally represented. It is right up here, and it is called Da'at, which means knowledge. Now that's very interesting. We're going to get back to it in a moment. This whole thing is called the Etz Chaim, the tree of life. And does that have any echoes from biblical stories? Wasn't there in the Garden of Eden the tree of life, which Adam and Eve were told they could eat of? It was fine, it was good for them, it gave them immortality. Wasn't there another tree in the Garden of Eden too? The tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? And they were forbidden to eat of that, right? And they did, and that's what got them into big trouble. All right, so there is a hidden Sephirah, which is the Sephirah of Da'at, of knowledge, which represents the tree of knowledge. And we're going to come back to that right shortly. Now, these 10 Sephirot are connected by paths. And here are the traditional paths. Actually, the paths are sometimes drawn differently depending on the variety of Kabbalah, but this is the most common variety of the paths. And if you count them, you will discover that there are 22 of them. Not going to bother to do that, but where else have we had the number 22? Or maybe I didn't mention it. The letters of the alphabet. Hebrew alphabet has 22 letters. So these 22 letters correspond with the 22 paths on the tree. And plus the 10 Sephirot, there are then said to be 32 paths on the tree. These Sephirot on the right side are called the right pillar, or the pillar of mercy. Those on the left side, oh, I see pillar is misspelled, good heavens, are called the pillar of severity. And in the center, we have the pillar of, with these four, the pillar of balance or harmony. Again, remember opposites, polar opposites, that's represented in the tree. All right, now we get back to our two trees. This is much later. This is an engraving by William Blake, the English mystical poet, who was well acquainted with many things, including Kabbalah. And this is a fascinating picture which is called The Fall of Man, and it shows the expulsion of Adam and of Eve from paradise. But notice, who are they being led out of paradise by? Who's holding their hands? That's Christ. So Blake saw Adam and Eve not being chased out of paradise, but being led triumphantly out of paradise by Christ. And in the background we have two trees. There is the tree of knowledge with the serpent coiled around it, and over here is the tree of life. Out there is God the Father. Lots of other things in this picture. But Blake's point is that eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge was not a bad thing. It was a good thing. It was a necessary thing. And this is Madame Blavatsky's view as well. So Blake was a proto-theosophist. And he expresses this by showing Christ leading Adam and Eve out of paradise. They have to go out into the world to experience, right? That's what the fall is. It is the emergence from innocent ignorance into the world in order to gain experience and knowledge and to discover our true nature. After which we can return, but not until then. That same idea is expressed in this earlier 15th century picture, which is, I think, a fascinating one, because here we have the tree, and notice the serpent is around it, right? So we know it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which produces death. Go into the world, and there's Eve, who is plucking the fruits from the tree and giving them to people. But not only is this the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it is also the tree of life. And here's the Virgin Mary, who is plucking the fruits of the tree of life, which are actually the hosts used in the Catholic Mass, and giving them to the faithful. And we know it's the tree of life because there's Christ on it. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life are the same tree, is what this 15th century picture is saying. Don't you think that's profound? There's really only one tree. It depends on how we relate to it. All right. We come back to, here we've got our 10 Sephirot again with the Hebrew and English names. And notice in this arrangement, how many different planes are there? 7, of course. So we can expect that these will correspond with the Theosophical 7s, and indeed they do. Keter, or the crown, corresponds to Atman, or to the first ray, which is the ray of freedom. Chokmah and Bina correspond with Buddhi, which is love. Chesed and Geburah correspond with Manas, which is wisdom. Tiferet, or beauty, corresponds with life, or jiva, or prana. Netzach and Hod correspond with form, that is the Linga Sharira. All right? Which is also, you have to understand form to have knowledge. So that's really 5th ray. Yesod corresponds with Kama, or devotion. And Malchut corresponds with the body, or the 7th ray of order. So we got a nice correspondence between the levels of the tree and the theosophical principles. All right, now moving right along to the next stage historically, we get the full development of Kabbalah in Spain. And here we have a title page of that most important of all Kabbalistic books, the Sefer HaZohar, the Book of Divine Splendor. And the Book of Divine Splendor gives an interpretation of much symbolism. And part of the symbolism of Kabbalah is contained, I mentioned this the other day, in this 7-branched candlestick, which is called a menorah, right? And now I'm going to show you how that has some symbolism. The 7-branched candlestick, in fact, represents the Kabbalistic tree. How? Its base is Malchut, the kingdom. the foundation, the body. Its first branching represents Yesod. Its next branching represents Tiferet. Its next branching represents that mysterious Sephirah, Da'at, or knowledge. And its top part represents Keter, the crown. These are the Sephirot of that central pillar, which we saw in the tree. Then where are the side Sephirot? Well, on either side of Keter is Chokmah and Bina, and on either side of them is Chesed and Geburah, and on them is Netzach and Hod. So we have the right pillar and the left pillar, each of which have 3 Sephirot, and the central pillar, which has 4 Sephirot plus the mysterious one. So every time a Jew lights the candles of the menorah, he in fact is lighting the lights of the tree of life. Wonderful symbolism. All right, now we talked about Adam Kadmon, right? The primordial human being, which in fact is the monad. And of course, since this is a human being, we can represent it by a human body. And here we have a human body representing Adam Kadmon. And please notice, what's unusual about this body? About its coloration. Half of it is white, and half of it is a darker color. Right? Again, yin-yang, black and white, the 2 polar halves of experience. And here the 10 Sephirot, or even the 11th one, because we include Da'at, are placed at different portions of the body, and this is traditional in Kabbalah. They are associated with different organs of the body. And this will correspond, let me suggest to you, with the 10 with the 7 with the chakras, the 7 chakras in the Theosophical tradition. So, what does the word Keter mean? I mentioned to you earlier. The crown. So it represents, of course, which chakra?
The crown chakra.
The crown chakra, the top of the head. The next 2 represent the brow chakra. The throat chakra corresponds with Da'at plus these 2. The heart chakra corresponds to Tiferet, and remember Tiferet is Jiva, Prana, life. Isn't that what we associate with the heart? Mm-hmm. The organ of life. The navel chakra corresponds with these 2. In the form of the chakras that we are most familiar, the 6th one is called the spleen chakra. But actually that was kind of substituted. Traditionally that chakra is associated with the generative organs. I think it was sort of Victorian sensibility, which made the Theosophists associated with the spleen instead. We don't like to talk about generation. But that corresponds with Yesod, which in Kabbalistic tradition is associated with the generative organs. Also remember it's associated with the principles with Kama. Doesn't that make sense? Mm-hmm. Desire. Yeah. And then the root chakra, which is at the base of the spine, is associated with Malchut, the kingdom, which is in Judaism, in Kabbalah, associated with the feet. Again, I think the same kind of what's mildly prudish sensibility is involved. One doesn't want to get involved with the backside, so we use the feet instead. Okay, don't you think that's some interesting correspondences between Kabbalistic thinking and Theosophical thinking? All right, let's move smartly ahead, and we get now the Christian Kabbalah. Now, I'm going to show you some pictures rather quickly on these things without taking too much time to go over them, but here is a very important Kabbalistic book, originally written in the 13th century. So it's early Kabbalah, and it is called the Shah Are Ora, which means the gates of light. Remember, Or was light. In Ein Sof Or, boundless light. That was translated by Christians in the 16th century and published as the Portae Lucis, which those of you who remember your Latin will know means gates of light. Okay. This is an interesting one. There was an English Kabbalist by the name of Robert Flood, and he published a book called Philosophia Sacred Philosophy in the 17th century, and we have here a Kabbalistic tree, but the interesting thing about it is that Flood made the tree upside down, with its roots coming out of the crown, the highest, the Sephirah, and its branches coming out of Malchut, the lowest one. The upside down tree is in fact a very widely known symbol. One finds it also in the Bhagavad Gita. Those of you who know the Bhagavad Gita may remember there is a chapter which talks about this wonderful tree which grows upside down, its roots in heaven and its branches on the earth. And that's the same symbol here. The tree of life is upside down. Why? Because we are the tree of life, right? The tree of life is Adam Kadmon, and we are Adam Kadmon, embodied. And where are our roots, pray? In heaven. And our branches are here on earth. So that's a very, very vivid exposition of that concept. Now this is an interesting one. Athanasius Kircher was a 17th century German Jesuit priest who got fascinated with Kabbalah. And this is his version of the tree. Notice how complex it is, right? We don't have time to go into all of this, but he worked all sorts of symbolism into the tree of life. Many of the Christians of the Renaissance became fascinated with Kabbalah and developed it in great detail. All right, then we'll move along to the next period, which is that which happened in Palestine, in the city of Safed, with Isaac Luria, who developed his own idea, and then I'm not going to talk about Hasidism, there's just time, so we'll look at Lurianic Kabbalah, the Kabbalah of Isaac Luria, the 16th century fellow who was known as the Lion of Safed. Safed is the city where he lived and taught. Now, what I'm going to do is put on the screen some of the basic ideas of Luria, which are very important for later Kabbalah. First of all, Luria said, how did the world come into being? How did God create the world? If God is everywhere, where is there room for the world? Right? He said, well, what happened was that God voluntarily contracted himself. He produced a little void in which he created the world. Now that's interesting because some of you who may have read Besant and Leadbeater's book on occult chemistry, somebody read that at some point? May remember that they talk about how the most primordial atoms, the very first bits of matter, come into existence. And they say they come into existence because there was a contraction, with little holes created in the basic substance. Same idea as Luria. Same idea as Luria. All right, then another idea was that Luria defined explicitly the notion of Adam Kadmon as being the source of all of the lower worlds and of the Sephirot. Adam Kadmon being the monad. And he developed a whole mythology. He said that after all of the Sephirot were emanated forth from Adam Kadmon, the tree of life was emanated forth, all of the Sephirot were like vessels, like cups, which were to contain the boundless light, right? The infinite light, the light of the Logos. But alas, the cups were not strong enough to hold the light. The light was infinite, and an infinite light cannot be contained in a finite cup. And so when the light poured into the cups shattered. They broke. And that scattered the light all over. And where is the light to be found now? In each one of us, right? The light got fragmented, broken, and now is contained in the shards of the original cups. And those shards are our bodies, right? Does this sound theosophical too? The monad gets, as it were, divided. Not really, of course, it can't be, but it is apparently divided. And in that breaking of the vessels, there was also a rupture between the two great halves. God is male and female, right? God is both. He's the unification of all opposites. He, she, it. He's the unification of all opposites. But with the shattering of the cups, that got divided. And so we now have sexual differences, and we've got to get back to the original unity. And then finally he said, well, this is what I've been talking about right now. We are netzotzim, divine sparks, which are entrapped in kelipot, husks or shells, and we undergo gilgulim, which means cyclicity, namely reincarnation. Okay? Very theosophical was Luria. And finally, there will at one time be a tikkun olam, which means a restoration of the world. Olam. So tikkun olam is the restoration of the world. And that restoration of the world happens through what we call evolution. And it's the means of that evolution which restores the world is kevanot. And kevanot is meditation or yoga. It's Hebrew, Kabbalistic meditation or yoga. And that meditation or yoga produces the tzaddikim. And the tzaddikim are the just ones. Tzaddik means just. They are the ones who are just. And they correspond with what in Christianity are called the just men made perfect. And who are the just men made perfect? The masters, the Mahatmas. So you see, Luria's view of how the world came into existence and how it is going to be restored was very, very theosophical. Right? All right. We talked about Jacob's ladder yesterday. Well, this again is another painting by William Blake of Jacob's ladder, and there's Jacob down there sleeping, and here is the ladder which winds around and around and around, and this is the text from Genesis which describes it. And Jacob dreamed, and behold, a ladder set upon the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven, and behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. And Jacob's ladder is then the symbol in Kabbalah for the connection between the lowest and the highest, as it is in all other traditions, including the ones we looked at yesterday. Now, particularly in Kabbalah, there are how many lower worlds? Worlds in which human beings exist? 4, right? And the tree of life exists in all 4 of those worlds. And the tree of life in each world is connected with the tree of life in the lower or higher world. They're all interconnected. And these 4 interconnected tree of lives are the ladder, Jacob's ladder. All right? And this is the diagram which shows that. And now I'm going to show you how they get connected. Here is the tree of life in the physical world, the world of Asiya, the world of action. There's Malchut, the lowest of the Sephirah, and there's Keter, the crown, right? In the physical world. And then there is a tree in the world of Yetzirah, which is the world of external mind and emotion, and there it is. And notice how it overlaps, right? So its low point, its Malchut, its kingdom, coincides with the Tiferet, or heart area of the lowest world. Right? And then in the next higher world, Beriah, the world of creation, we have another tree with the same kind of connection. Its lowest point, or kingdom coincides with the Tiferet or heart of the lower tree. And finally, atop Atzilut, the world of emanation, there is another tree. And so you see the four trees are all connected and they form a ladder. You sort of see a ladder in that, yes, symbolically? So the ladder in Kabbalah is the four interconnected trees. And how do we get from the world of action to the world of emanation? We climb the ladder. So we go up the tree of life in each of the four worlds. All right, now we're almost done. We'll look at the modern occult Kabbalah, which was developed especially by Eliphas Levi, a Frenchman in the 19th century, and he did a lot with Kabbalah, and we get the modern Kabbalah, which springs partly from that and partly from all of the preceding ones. And I'm going to show you some versions of the tree. I'm not going to spend much time talking about them, but this is a modern tree of life, and notice each of the connecting paths has on it a card of the tarot deck that was introduced by Eliphas Levi, and a lot of modern Kabbalists use that. They use the tarot, they associate the tarot with the tree of life. And here is another modern tree which shows the serpent on it. Now the serpent got a bad name from Genesis, didn't he? Because he tempted Eve. There's that wonderful story when God said, "What did you do?" And to Adam, and Adam says, "Oh, I ate the fruit, and Eve gave it to me." And God says to Eve, "What did you do?" And she said, "Well, I plucked the fruit, but the serpent made me do it." Isn't that a human reaction? Find somebody else to blame. And the serpent was the one that has the ultimate blame. Well, that's not the correct view of the serpent, right? The serpent is actually a symbol of wisdom. In Indian, in all sorts of other traditions, it's a symbol of wisdom. And so here we have the serpent on the tree, and if you look, the serpent's body crosses every one of the paths, right? It winds around all of the paths. In order to get from the bottom to the top, we have to go on every path, right?
Can we relate that to the Shushumna and the Ida and the
Absolutely, absolutely. That's Kundalini.
Yeah.
The serpent rising on the paths is Kundalini, the serpent fire, right? Absolutely. And this is, you're quite right, this is the central, the spinal path, and these are the two side paths in traditional yoga. You know, all of these systems are saying the same thing under different terms. That's the whole point of all of my talks. Every talk I give is going to have that as a central point. There is one archetypal truth which gets expressed in many different forms, and we're looking at some of the forms to see the variety of expressions of the one truth.
John.
Yes, sir.
Is it true in reality that the DNA is supposed to have 3 strands, 2 of which science has discovered, and it's going to be another one?
I hope so.
Yeah.
One likes to see these correspondences. Right. Okay. All right, now we're going to do a summary of the Kabbalistic teachings which we've been looking at during the past hour. The main ones. The divine produces the universe by contracting itself. Right? There is no place else for it to come from. There are 7 cosmic states, 3 veils of negative existence, and 4 worlds, corresponding with the 7 theosophical planes. The divine emanates Adam Kadmon, who is the monad, the one life, and 10 Sephirot on 7 levels in what is called the Etz Chaim, or Tree of Life. The vessels, which are the 10 Sephirot, shatter into shells or shards because they cannot bear the infinite light. We all are fragments of Adam Kadmon, the monad. We are reincarnating a process called Gilgul in Hebrew. In Kelipot are shells, which are bodies. Our consciousness exists on 5 levels, or souls. And the world will be restored as we become just, holy. And incidentally, the English word holy and the English word whole, W-H-O-L-E, are historically the same word. The similarity of pronunciation is not accidental. It's etymological. To be holy, one must be whole. To be whole is to be holy. So when we restore these fragmented parts into a single part, we will be whole and we will be holy, and that is to be just. And we do that through a practice of yoga, or kevanot, which is yoga. What does yoga mean? Unity. Right? It's the same word as English yoke, bringing things together. So we must practice yoga under whatever name we call it, and that will help us to restore the original unity. And that's the end of that. So thank you.
5 senses and the extra senses, do you remember? What she tells us that there are extra senses on top of the 5, and we're going to develop those. I haven't got time to, and I haven't got really time for skandhas. If you want to look at the skandhas and show another fascinating topic, I've just got 1 or 2 sources here. Secret Doctrine, Volume 3. Volume 3, not very many people have, page 587. We'll talk about the skandhas, which are germs, of course, which attributes which unite birth. You know what the skandhas are. And the aggregation constitutes the personality. Those are the skandhas. And if you know, it's not in Volume 1 and Volume 2, skandhas. But if you look in the 6th volume edition, and you can find that, of course, in your libraries, you'll have to go to Volume 5 of the 6th volume edition, if you want to make notes, page 560. Or go to Geoffrey Barborka's Divine Plan. Now there's a lovely book. That's a good book. Geoffrey Barborka's Divine Plan, page 416, will talk to you about the skandhas. And if you go to the Mahatma Letters, the chronological order, page 68. Mahatma Letters, chronological, page 68, will talk about the skandhas. And that's another important topic, because it's important because people come to us and they want to know about how the attributes and whatnot are from life to life. It's an incredibly different subject. Oh, there we are. Now, I want to go on to W, the world, and I think I mentioned this in my few remarks on Saturday night. The world is viewed by most people as a noun, but we must view it as a verb. And again, you have P.J. Bowen. Yes, we have 2 minutes? Is that all, dear? Well, let's start tomorrow. Again and again, we have P.J. Bowen talking about ever becoming as a process. Now, I think I've just got time for another quote from our friend, the Rainbow and the Worm, page 236, it's got here. Where again, yes, I've done it. Oh, cheers and cheers, hooray, hooray. I've talked about the level of Gaia hypothesis, which I'm just repeated there. And we have to constantly remind ourselves that the whole thing is an ever-becoming process. From the micro, shall we say, or the atom, if you like, all the way through to galaxies and the rest of it. And we also have to keep in mind about the process going in spirals and in cycles. Sometimes the spiral becomes a spiral within a spiral, you know. I can remember dear Ianthe saying to me, Ianthe Hoskins, oh, she says, cycles and rounds, I don't understand a word of it, I can't be bothered with that, she said. But it's very difficult because you've got spirals, you've got to think of an overall spiral, and if you look at the portion of the spiral, then you've got to see another spiral within that. And then you look at that part of the spiral, and there's another spiral within that. And sometimes those spirals are downwards against the prevailing trend. And we can see that, perhaps we can see it, hope to cover tomorrow now, we can see that there is perhaps a downward trend in general things.
The vortex is a three-dimensional spiral.
Yes, yes, the vortex. Right. Oh, yes, well, I have a lovely book at home, which you will know about, I think, about vortices, talking about vortices, and all sorts of and plants, and particularly plants, pine cones and the rest of it, which is wonderful. Yes, well, I think I'm told I must finish there. Indeed, thank you very much for listening. Hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you.